The stagecoach rattled away in a cloud of dust, leaving Rose Richmond standing alone at the edge of the small Wyoming town, her cheeks wet with tears and her heart heavier than the trunk at her feet. April 1875 had brought nothing but heartbreak so far, and as she stared down the empty dirt road, she wondered if coming west had been the biggest mistake of her 20-year-old life. Rose dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief embroidered with her initials, a parting gift from her mother back in Boston. The man she had traveled over 1,000 miles to marry a cattle rancher named Thomas Hawkins, who had advertised for a bride in the eastern newspapers, was nowhere to be found. The station master had delivered the crushing news that Hawkins had married someone else just 3 days earlier, apparently tired of waiting for his mail-order bride's delayed arrival. "Miss, are you all right?" A deep voice called from behind her. Rose turned to see a tall figure on horseback approaching slowly. The afternoon sun silhouetted him against the golden Wyoming sky, making it difficult to see his face beneath the wide-brimmed hat. His horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, snorted and pawed at the ground. "I'm fine," Rose lied, wiping away fresh tears. Pride was all she had left, and she clung to it desperately. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing a man perhaps 5 or 6 years her senior. His face was tanned from long days under the prairie sun, with kind blue eyes that contrasted sharply with his weathered appearance. Unlike many men she'd seen since arriving in the West, his face was clean-shaven, though a layer of trail dust coated his denim pants and cotton shirt. "Forgive me for saying so, madam, but you don't look fine," he said, removing his hat and holding it respectfully against his chest. "I'm Wade Ingram. I run the Double Circle Ranch about 10 miles north of town." Rose hesitated before responding. "Rose Richmond. I've come from Boston too." "Well, it doesn't matter now." Wade's eyes moved to the trunk beside her, then back to the road where the stagecoach had disappeared. Understanding dawned on his face. "You're a mail-order bride." It wasn't a question, and Rose saw no point in denying it. She nodded, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "The man I was to marry apparently grew tired of waiting and found someone else." "Thomas Hawkins?" Wade asked, his expression darkening. Rose looked up in surprise. "Yes, do you know him?" "Everyone knows Hawkins," Wade said, his tone carefully neutral. "Town's not that big." Rose noticed how Wade's jaw tightened when he mentioned Hawkins' name. There was clearly no love lost between the two men. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight, Miss Richmond?" Wade asked. Rose glanced toward the town, a collection of wooden buildings straddling the main street. The station master mentioned a boarding house, but she trailed off, reluctant to admit she had very little money left after the journey west. Wade nodded, seeming to understand her predicament without her having to explain. He looked at her trunk, then at his horse, making a quick decision. "If you'll permit me, I can help get you settled. Mrs. Peterson runs a respectable place, and she's always been kind to newcomers." Wade moved toward her trunk. "May I?" Rose nodded, watching as he effortlessly lifted the heavy trunk and secured it to his saddle. "Can you ride, Miss Richmond?" he asked. "Please call me Rose," she said. "And yes, though it's been some time." Wade offered a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "Well then, Rose, would you allow me to escort you into town? You can ride dash here and I'll walk alongside." For the first time since stepping off the stagecoach, Rose felt a small flicker of hope. "Thank you, Mr. Ingram." "Your kindness is unexpected but most welcome." "Wade," he corrected gently, offering his hand to help her mount. Rose settled herself sideways on the saddle, arranging her skirts as modestly as possible. Wade took the reins and began leading the horse toward town, walking steadily beside her. "What will you do now?" he asked after they had traveled a short distance in comfortable silence. Rose sighed. "I'm not entirely sure. I have some skills. I can read and write well. I'm good with numbers, and my mother taught me to sew. Perhaps I can find employment of some kind until I decide whether to stay or return east." "The school teacher left last month," Wade offered. "Town's looking for someone new. Might be worth asking at the town hall." Hope flickered again in Rose's chest. Teaching was something she could do, something respectable that would allow her to maintain her independence. "Thank you. I'll inquire tomorrow," she said, As they approached the main street, Rose became uncomfortably aware of the curious stares from townsfolk going about their afternoon business. A woman in a dusty traveling dress atop a cowboy's horse was clearly a source of interest in the small community. "Don't mind them," Wade said, noticing her discomfort. "News travels fast here and they're just curious. By tomorrow, they'll have moved on to something else." "Is that Mrs. Peterson's boarding house?" Rose asked, nodding toward a two-story white building with green shutters and a small sign hanging from the porch. "It is. She's a widow, runs a tight ship, but has a good heart. You'll be safe there," Wade assured her. They stopped in front of the boarding house, and Wade helped Rose dismount before retrieving her trunk from his horse. As they climbed the steps to the porch, the door opened to reveal a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Wade Ingram, twice in 1 month. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" the woman asked, her gaze shifting curiously to Rose. "Mrs. Peterson, this is Miss Rose Richmond. She's new to town and needs lodging," Wade explained. The older woman's eyes softened as she looked at Rose. "Oh dear. You're the one who came for Thomas Hawkins, aren't you? Word spreads fast in Pinewood." Rose felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Yes, madam." "Well, you're better off without that scoundrel," Mrs. Peterson declared firmly. "Come in, dear. I have a lovely room available with a view of the mountains." Wade set Rose's trunk down in the foyer. "Mrs. Peterson will take good care of you," he said. "If you need anything, my ranch isn't far. Just ask anyone in town for directions to the double circle." "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Ingram Wade," Rose said sincerely. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." "It was my pleasure, Rose," he replied with a tip of his hat. "Good luck with the teaching position. Pinewood could use someone like you." With that, he was gone, and Rose found herself being shepherded upstairs by Mrs. Peterson, who was already explaining the house rules and meal times. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a dresser, a washstand, and the promised view of the mountains through a lace-curtained window. "Supper's at 6 sharp," Mrs. Peterson informed her. "There's hot water for washing up. Don't worry about payment just yet. We can discuss terms tomorrow when you've had some rest." Left alone, Rose sank onto the edge of the bed, her emotions finally catching up with her. The journey west, the crushing disappointment, the uncertainty of her future, it all washed over her in a wave. Yet as she gazed out at the mountains turning purple in the fading light, she found herself thinking of kind blue eyes and a steady presence walking beside her through town. Perhaps Wyoming held promise after all. The next morning, Rose woke to sunshine streaming through her window and the sounds of a town coming to life. After dressing in her most professional outfit, a navy blue dress with white collar and cuffs, she made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Peterson serving breakfast to the other boarders. "Good morning, dear," the older woman greeted her warmly. "You're just in time for hot cakes." Rose was introduced to the other residents, Mr. Jenkins, an elderly accountant who worked at the bank, Miss Clara Winters, who operated the town's millinery shop, and Mr. Thaddeus Burton, a quiet man who Rose later learned was the town's undertaker. They welcomed her politely, though she sensed their curiosity about her situation. "I heard you might be interested in the teaching position," Miss Winters remarked as she passed the syrup. "The children have been without instruction for nearly a month now." "Yes, I thought I would inquire today," Rose confirmed. "Do you know who I should speak with?" "Mayor Wilson handles school matters," Mr. Jenkins informed her. "His office is next to the bank. He's usually there by 9. After breakfast, Rose set out to explore the town and find the mayor's office. Pinewood was larger than she'd initially thought, with a main street lined with businesses, a general store, bank, saloon, blacksmith, and various shops. A white church steeple rose at one end of town, and she could see the schoolhouse a short distance away, a simple one-room building with a bell tower. The mayor's office was easy to find, and to Rose's relief, Mayor Wilson proved to be a practical man who was more concerned with her qualifications than her personal circumstances. "Can you handle a room full of children ranging from 6 to 16? He asked, peering at her over wire-rimmed spectacles. "I was an assistant teacher at a girls' academy in Boston," Rose answered confidently. I'm familiar with managing different age groups and abilities, and you can teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography. Yes, sir. I'm also capable of teaching basic sciences, literature, and music if required. Mayor Wilson's bushy eyebrows rose appreciatively. Music? That would be a fine addition. Our previous teacher, Miss Holbrook, left rather suddenly to marry a railroad man in Denver. He studied Rose for a moment. I understand you came here under different circumstances, Miss Richmond. Rose straightened her spine. Yes, sir, but I assure you, I'm fully committed to staying in Pinewood and serving this community if given the opportunity. The mayor nodded. The position pays $30 a month. There's a small cottage behind the schoolhouse where teachers traditionally live. It's modest but private. The school term runs through June, and if you're satisfactory, we'd continue your employment in September. Rose could hardly believe her luck. A job, housing, and independence, it was more than she dared hope for. When would you like me to start? She asked. Monday, the mayor replied promptly. That gives you 3 days to settle in and prepare. Mrs. Wilson will show you the cottage this afternoon and help you get situated. By late afternoon, Rose had been given a tour of both the schoolhouse and the teacher's cottage. The schoolroom was simple but well maintained, with rows of desks facing a larger desk and blackboard at the front. Bookshelves lined one wall, though the selection was limited compared to what she was accustomed to in Boston. The cottage was indeed small, just one main room with a cast iron stove, a table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed, and a dresser. A curtained area concealed a washstand and chamber pot. It was humble but clean, and best of all, it would be hers alone. Mrs. Wilson, a kind woman with prematurely white hair, helped Rose make a list of supplies she would need. The general store carries most essentials, she explained, and they deliver larger items for a small fee. I'll have some linens sent over from the house for you to use until you can get your own. Rose thanked her profusely, still amazed at how quickly her fortunes had changed. It's our good fortune to find a qualified teacher so quickly, Mrs. Wilson assured her. The children need structure and learning. Too many of them would end up running wild or working too young without proper schooling. As Rose walked back to the boarding house to collect her trunk, she passed the general store and decided to go in and introduce herself. The bell above the door jangled as she entered, and she found herself in a large room filled with goods of every description, from foodstuffs to fabric, tools to toys. "Good afternoon," called a cheerful voice. A rotund man with an impressive mustache emerged from behind a counter. "Welcome to Wilson's General Merchandise. I'm Harold Wilson." "Another Wilson?" Rose asked with a smile. The man chuckled. "The mayor's my brother. Small towns, you know. I'm guessing you're Miss Richmond. News travels fast." "Yes, I'm Rose Richmond. I've just accepted the teaching position." "Wonderful news. We've been hoping someone suitable would come along. My youngest, Ellie, has been pestering me daily about when school would resume." As they chatted, the bell jangled again, and Rose turned to see Wade Ingram entering the store. He stopped short when he saw her, then smiled warmly. "Miss Richmond, I'm glad to see you're settling in." "Mr. Ingram," she greeted him, surprising herself with how pleased she was to see him again. "I have good news. I've been offered the teaching position." "That's wonderful," Wade said sincerely. "The town needs a good teacher." Mr. Wilson looked between them with interest. "Wade, you already know our new school teacher. We met yesterday when Miss Richmond arrived," Wade explained simply, not elaborating on the circumstances. Rose appreciated his discretion. She didn't want to be known forever as the abandoned mail-order bride. "I've just been shown the teacher's cottage," Rose said. "I'll be moving in tomorrow and starting classes on Monday. If you need help moving your things, I'd be happy to assist," Wade offered. "That's very kind, but I don't have much, just my trunk. Mrs. Peterson has already arranged for the boarding house handyman to help me," Wade nodded, turning to Mr. Wilson. "I came for those fence supplies and mail, Harold." As the men conducted their business, Rose browsed the store, making mental notes of items she would need for her new home. She was examining a blue enameled coffee pot when Wade approached her again. "A good choice," he commented. "Those enamel ones last longer than tin." "I'm making a list of essentials," Rose explained. I need to be practical with my first paycheck still weeks away. Wade hesitated. Miss Richmond, if you need an advance, I'm sure the town council. Thank you, but no, Rose interrupted firmly. I have enough to manage until my first payment. I've always believed in standing on my own 2 feet. Something like admiration flickered in Wade's eyes. A valuable quality out here. They walked outside together, and Rose noticed a loaded wagon waiting in front of the store. Is your ranch far? She asked, genuinely curious about his life. About 10 miles north, Wade replied. Not far by Western standards. I raise cattle primarily, though I keep some horses too. It must be beautiful out there. It is, he agreed. Especially this time of year with the spring grass coming in and wildflowers starting to bloom. There was an awkward pause as they both seemed to realize they had no real reason to continue conversing, yet neither seemed eager to part ways. Well, I should get back to Mrs. Peterson's, Rose finally said. I have lessons to plan before Monday. Of course. Wade replaced his hat. Good luck with your first day of teaching, Miss Richmond. Thank you, Mr. Ingram. As she walked away, Rose found herself wondering when she might see him again. The thought startled her. She had come to Wyoming to marry one man and had been rejected before even meeting him. The last thing she should be thinking about was another man, especially one she barely knew. Yet, there was something about Wade Ingram that inspired trust. In a town full of strangers, he had been the first to offer help with no expectations. That kind of genuine goodness was rare, in Boston or Wyoming. Rose spent the weekend moving into the teacher's cottage and preparing for her first day of classes. The town had been generous. Mrs. Wilson provided linens and curtains. Mrs. Peterson contributed a basket of food staples, and Miss Winters from the millinery sent over a pretty cushion for the rocking chair that appeared mysteriously on the cottage porch. By Sunday evening, the cottage felt homey, despite its simplicity. Rose had arranged her few personal items, photographs of her parents, now both deceased, her mother's Bible, a small collection of beloved books, and the quilt her grandmother had made for her to create a sense of belonging. As she prepared for bed, she heard hoofbeats outside, followed by a soft knock at her door. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders over her nightdress, she approached cautiously. Who is it? She called. Wade Ingram, Miss Richmond. I apologize for the late hour. Surprised, Rose opened the door a few inches, keeping her shawl tightly closed. Wade stood on her porch, hat in hand, looking somewhat uncomfortable. I'm sorry to disturb you, he said immediately. I was passing through town on my way back from delivering cattle to the railroad depot in Cheyenne. I thought you might be able to use these for your classroom. He held out a small wooden crate. Inside, Rose could see several books, a box of chalk, and what appeared to be a small globe. These belong to my sister, Wade explained. She taught school back in Missouri before she passed. I've had these things stored away, but they should be used. Rose was touched by the gesture. Mr. Ingram, this is incredibly thoughtful. Please come in for a moment while I look through them. She opened the door wider, then remembered her state of dress. Actually, perhaps you could wait here while I get properly attired. A hint of color touched Wade's cheeks. No need, Miss Richmond. I should be on my way. I just wanted to drop these off before your first day tomorrow. Rose accepted the crate. Thank you, truly. Books are precious out here, I imagine. They are, Wade agreed. My sister always said a good teacher could change a child's entire future. A sentiment I share, Rose said softly. I never had the chance to meet her, but your sister sounds like she was a remarkable woman. Something passed across Wade's face, grief, perhaps, or a fond memory. She was. Good night, Miss Richmond. Good luck tomorrow. Before Rose could respond, he had mounted his horse and ridden off into the darkness, leaving her standing in the doorway with his thoughtful gift. Monday dawned bright and clear, perfect for a first day of school. Rose dressed carefully in a crisp white shirtwaist and dark green skirt, pinning her auburn hair into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. She wanted to appear professional and approachable to her new students. The school bell hadn't been rung in weeks, so when Rose pulled the rope at precisely 8 o'clock, the clear tones seemed to startle the town. Within minutes, children began arriving, some running eagerly, others dragging their feet, a few accompanied by parents curious about the new teacher. By 8:30, 23 students ranging from 6 to 16 had assembled in the schoolroom. Rose stood at the front, hands clasped, surveying what would be her responsibility for the coming months. "Good morning," she began. "I am Miss Richmond, your new teacher. I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you and helping you learn and grow." The younger children stared wide-eyed, while the older ones assessed her with the wary gaze of adolescence, determining if she would be strict or lenient, boring or interesting. "Before we begin, I'd like each of you to stand, tell me your name, age, and something you enjoy learning about." The introductions revealed a diverse group. Farmers' children, shopkeepers' offspring, and a few from ranching families who rode in from outlying properties. Rose made mental notes, already planning how to organize lessons to accommodate the various ages and abilities. Among the older students was a tall, serious boy of 15 who introduced himself as William Ingram. "Are you related to Wade Ingram?" Rose asked, making the connection. "He's my uncle, madam," the boy replied. "I live at the Double Circle. Is your father at the ranch as well?" Rose inquired politely. A shadow crossed William's face. "No, madam. My parents died of fever 3 years ago. Uncle Wade took me in." Rose felt a pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, William. I lost my parents as well, so I understand how difficult that can be." The boy nodded, seemingly appreciative of her understanding rather than pity. As the day progressed, Rose began to get a sense of each student's abilities and temperament. Little Sally Wilson, the storekeeper's daughter, was bright and eager. The Peterson twins were mischievous, but quick-witted. William Ingram was quiet, but showed remarkable aptitude for mathematics and history. By the time the final bell rang at 3 o'clock, Rose was exhausted but exhilarated. Teaching had always brought her joy, and these Wyoming children, with their directness and varied life experiences, presented an exciting challenge. As the students filed out, William Ingram lingered behind. "Miss Richmond," he said hesitantly, "Uncle Wade asked me to invite you to Sunday dinner at the ranch. He said to tell you it's a tradition for the school teacher to visit each family during the term, and since I'm his only family, you might as well start with us." Rose was surprised by the invitation. "That's very kind, William. Please tell your uncle I would be delighted to accept." The boy nodded, a hint of a smile crossing his serious face. "He'll send the buggy for you after church. The ranch is too far for you to ride alone." As William left, Rose wondered about the invitation. Was it merely frontier hospitality, a recognition of her position in the community? Or was there something more to Wade Ingram's interest in her? She pushed the thought aside. Her focus needed to be on establishing herself as a respected teacher, not on romantic speculation. Still, as she closed up the schoolhouse for the day, she couldn't help but look forward to Sunday with unexpected anticipation. The rest of the week passed in a blur of lessons, getting to know her students and settling into life in Pinewood. Rose quickly established a routine, rising early to prepare for the day, teaching until mid-afternoon, then spending evenings grading assignments and planning lessons. On Wednesday and Saturday afternoons, she ventured into town for supplies and to become acquainted with the community. She learned that Pinewood had been established 15 years earlier, initially as a trading post that gradually grew into a proper town. Many residents had come west after the Civil War, seeking new opportunities away from the devastation in the east and south. The railroad had reached them 5 years ago, bringing increased commerce and connection to the wider world. Rose also began to hear more about Wade Ingram. According to Mrs. Peterson, he had arrived in Wyoming about 8 years ago with his sister and brother-in-law. They had built the Double Circle Ranch together until the couple's untimely death from typhoid 3 years passed, leaving Wade to raise his nephew alone. "He's a good man, Mrs. Peterson told Rose as they sat on the boarding house porch one evening. "Honest in his dealings, fair to his workers, never causes trouble unlike some ranchers." "Some ranchers?" Rose queried. Mrs. Peterson's lips tightened. "There's been tension between some of the cattle operations. Water rights, grazing land, the usual disputes out here. Thomas Hawkins," she paused, glancing at Rose apologetically. "Well, he's been at the center of most disagreements." "Please, don't worry about mentioning Mr. Hawkins," Rose assured her. I never met the man, so I have no personal feelings about him. This wasn't entirely true. Rose did harbor some resentment toward the man who had agreed to marry her and then changed his mind without even the courtesy of a letter. But dwelling on it served no purpose. Well, Hawkins and Wade have had their differences, Mrs. Peterson continued. Nothing violent, mind you, but there's no love lost between them. Some say it goes back to when Wade's brother-in-law was alive. There was a dispute over water rights that got rather heated. Rose absorbed this information thoughtfully. It explained the tension she'd sensed when Wade mentioned Hawkins that first day. What about Mrs. Hawkins? Rose asked, curious about the woman who had taken what was to be her place. The woman he married instead of me. Constance Miller, she's the daughter of a rancher from over near Laramie. Pretty girl, about your age. They'd been sweet on each other as youngsters, from what I hear. When she came back to visit family, Thomas apparently decided he was tired of waiting for his mail-order bride. Rose tried to feel anger or jealousy, but found she could summon neither emotion. If anything, she felt relieved. The thought of being married to a man who could so easily discard an agreement didn't bear consideration. Sunday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures perfect for Rose's visit to the Double Circle Ranch. She wore her best dress for church, a dusty rose color that complemented her auburn hair, with a matching bonnet secured by a ribbon under her chin. The church service was well attended, with nearly everyone in town present. Rose noticed Wade and William sitting near the back, both looking somewhat uncomfortable in their Sunday best. Wade caught her eye briefly and nodded in greeting. After the service, as promised, a buggy waited outside the church. To Rose's surprise, Wade himself was at the reins rather than sending a ranch hand. "Miss Richmond," he greeted her, stepping down to help her into the buggy. "I hope you don't mind the drive, it's about an hour to the ranch." "Not at all," Rose replied. "I've been curious to see more of the countryside. I've hardly left town since arriving." William joined them, sitting beside his uncle while Rose took the opposite seat. As they traveled north, the landscape opened up before them, rolling hills covered in spring grass, stands of cottonwood trees along creek beds, and in the distance, the dramatic silhouette of mountains. "It's beautiful," Rose remarked, taking in the scenery. "So different from Massachusetts." "You miss it?" Wade asked, glancing at her. Rose considered the question. "I miss certain aspects, the familiarity, some comforts, but there's something freeing about the openness here." Wade nodded in understanding. "That's what drew me west, room to breathe, to build something of your own." The conversation flowed easily as they traveled. William, normally so quiet in class, opened up when discussing ranch life, telling Rose about the new foals born that spring and the cattle drive Wade had just completed. "Uncle Wade's teaching me the business," he explained proudly. "Says the ranch will be mine someday." "Your uncle is fortunate to have such a capable apprentice," Rose replied, noting how the boy straightened at her praise. Wade caught her eye with a grateful look. As they crested a hill, the Double Circle Ranch came into view in the valley below. Rose was impressed by the size and orderliness of the operation. A large two-story house built of logs and stone stood as the centerpiece, surrounded by various outbuildings, corrals, and barns. A creek wound through the property, its banks lined with cottonwoods and willows. "This is all yours?" she asked, unable to hide her amazement. 800 acres, Wade confirmed, a hint of pride in his voice. "Started with just 100 when my sister and her husband came out here. We built it together, acre by acre." As they approached the house, Rose noticed the careful touches that made it a home rather than just a dwelling. Curtains at the windows, a covered porch with rocking chairs, flower beds awaiting summer blooms. "My sister's influence," Wade explained, following her gaze. Sarah insisted a home needed softness, even in cattle country. A middle-aged woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping her hands on an apron. "Mrs. Garrett, our housekeeper," Wade introduced her. "She keeps us from living like complete savages." The woman snorted at this characterization. "And a full-time job it is, Mr. Ingram. You must be Miss Richmond. We've heard good things about you from young William here." "Thank you for having me," Rose said warmly. Inside, the house was surprisingly comfortable. The main floor contained a spacious kitchen, a dining room with a large oak table, and a sitting room with bookshelves lining one wall. Simple but well-made furniture filled the spaces, and landscape paintings brightened the log walls. "William, show Miss Richmond the garden while Mrs. Garrett and I finished dinner preparations," Wade suggested. The garden turned out to be an ambitious vegetable plot behind the house, along with an orchard of young fruit trees. "Uncle Wade started this after my mother died," William explained as they walked between neat rows. "She always wanted fruit trees, but they didn't have time to plant them before." He trailed off. "It's a lovely tribute to her," Rose said gently. William nodded. "Uncle Wade says remembering people isn't just about feeling sad they're gone, it's about carrying on the good they wanted to do." Rose was touched by the sentiment. "Your uncle is a wise man." "He is," William agreed seriously. "Some of the other ranchers laugh because he reads so much. He's got books on cattle breeding, land management, even politics. Says a man's mind needs tending just like his land." Rose's estimation of Wade Ingram continued to rise. In Boston, such intellectual curiosity would be expected, but out here, where physical labor dominated daily life, it spoke of a man who valued more than just material success. Dinner was a surprisingly elaborate affair: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from the root cellar, followed by apple pie that Mrs. Garrett proudly declared had been made with apples from the East, since their own trees weren't yet producing. The conversation was lively, with William eagerly discussing school projects and Wade asking thoughtful questions about Rose's teaching methods and goals for the students. "Education was important in my family," Wade explained. "My father was a teacher before the war. He believed learning was the great equalizer." "A sentiment I share," Rose replied. "Every child deserves the chance to develop their mind, regardless of circumstances." After dinner, Mrs. Garrett shooed them out of the kitchen, insisting she could handle the cleanup alone. William excused himself to check on a new foal, leaving Rose and Wade alone in the sitting room. "Would you like to see the library?" Wade asked. "It's not extensive, but I'm rather proud of it." He led her to a small room off the main sitting area. 3 walls were lined with bookshelves, filled with an eclectic collection: practical manuals on ranching and medicine, history books, novels, poetry, and scientific texts. "This is impressive," Rose said sincerely, running her fingers along the spines. "Many homes in Boston don't have collections this diverse. Books are windows to places we may never see," Wade said, watching her explore. "Out here, that's especially valuable." Rose pulled out a volume of Wordsworth's poetry. "This was my father's favorite." "The world is too much with us, late and soon," Wade quoted softly. Rose looked up in surprise. "You know Wordsworth? I'm not just a cowboy, Miss Richmond," he replied with a smile that transformed his serious face. "No," she agreed, "you're certainly not just a cowboy." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken recognition of a shared sensibility that neither had expected to find in the other. Wade cleared his throat. "How are you finding Pinewood, truthfully?" Rose considered the question. "It's an adjustment. Everything is different: the pace, the priorities, the landscape. But the people have been kind, and there's a directness here I find refreshing." "And your disappointment with Hawkins?" Wade asked carefully. "Strangely, I feel more embarrassed than heartbroken," Rose admitted. "I never met the man, after all. We exchanged letters for months, but words on paper can present any image one wishes to project." Wade nodded. "True enough. Though I'm sorry for your trouble, I can't help thinking Hawkins did you a favor." "Oh," Rose raised an eyebrow. "He's not a man I'd want a friend to marry," Wade said simply. Before Rose could ask for elaboration, William returned, effectively ending their private conversation. The rest of the afternoon passed pleasantly, with a tour of the ranch buildings and an introduction to Wade's prize horses. As evening approached and they prepared to return Rose to town, she found herself reluctant to leave. The ranch had a peaceful quality, a sense of purpose and permanence that appealed to her deeply. "Thank you for your hospitality," she told Wade as he helped her into the buggy. "I've enjoyed today immensely." "The pleasure was ours," he replied. "Perhaps you'll visit again." "I'd like that," Rose said sincerely. The The ride back to town was quieter, with William dozing against his uncle's shoulder and the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape. Rose found herself stealing glances at Wade's profile, struck by how at ease she felt in his company despite having known him such a short time. When they reached her cottage, Wade insisted on seeing her to the door while William waited with the buggy. "Thank you again," Rose said, standing on her small porch. "Miss Richmond Rose," Wade began, then hesitated. "I hope you'll feel welcome to visit the ranch whenever you wish, not just as William's teacher but as a friend." The way he said friend suggested he might be thinking of something more, but was too respectful to say so directly. "I'd like that, Wade," she replied, using his given name for the first time outside of her thoughts. "Good night." As the buggy disappeared down the darkening road, Rose felt a curious mixture of contentment and anticipation. Something was beginning, something unexpected but welcome. After the disappointment that had brought her to Wyoming, she hadn't imagined finding any romantic interest so soon, or that it would be with a man so different from what she had envisioned for herself. But Wade Ingram was compelling in ways Thomas Hawkins, sight unseen, had never been. His kindness, intelligence, and quiet strength spoke to qualities Rose had always valued, but hadn't necessarily expected to find in a Western rancher. As spring progressed into early summer, Rose settled fully into her role as Pinewood's teacher. Her students were advancing well, and she had earned the respect of both parents and town officials. Her cottage had become a true home, with touches of beauty added as her finances allowed curtains she had sewn herself, wildflowers in jam jars, and a colorful braided rug for the previously bare floor. Her friendship with Wade continued to develop through regular interactions. He often came to town on ranch business and made a point of stopping by the school or her cottage. Sometimes, William would bring notes from his uncle with gifts of fresh vegetables from the ranch garden or a book he thought she might enjoy. On one particularly beautiful Saturday in early June, Wade invited Rose to join him and William for a picnic by the creek that ran through the Double Circle property. The day was perfect warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers and sun-warmed grass. Wade spread a blanket beneath a large cottonwood tree while William unpacked the basket Mrs. Garrett had prepared. The creek gurgled nearby, and meadowlarks called from the surrounding grassland. "This is one of my favorite spots on the ranch," Wade told Rose as they settled on the blanket. "My sister and I used to sit here in the evenings and talk about our dreams for this place." "You must miss her terribly," Rose said gently. Wade nodded. "Every day, but having William helps. He's so much like her. Same thoughtful nature, same quiet determination." William looked up from where he was arranging the food, a pleased expression crossing his face at his uncle's words. The afternoon passed in easy companionship. They ate cold chicken, biscuits, and fresh strawberries while talking about everything from school matters to ranch concerns to books they had recently read. After eating, William asked permission to fish in the creek, leaving Wade and Rose alone. "You've made quite an impression on the town," Wade remarked as they watched William upstream. "Mayor Wilson told me enrollment has increased since you arrived. Parents who previously kept their children home to work are now sending them to school." "That's gratifying to hear," Rose replied. "Every child deserves an education, even if they'll ultimately work the land." "Especially if they'll work the land," Wade corrected with a smile. "An educated farmer or rancher has advantages." Their conversation drifted to more personal topics: childhood memories, hopes for the future, views on various matters. Rose found herself opening up about her life in Boston, including the financial hardships that had led her to consider becoming a mail-order bride. "After my parents died, the family savings dwindled quickly," she explained. "Teaching at the girls' academy paid barely enough for room and board when I saw Mr. Hawkins' advertisement promising a comfortable life in exchange for a wife who could help manage his household accounts and perhaps teach his future children. It seemed practical. And now," Wade asked, his blue eyes intent on her face, "do you regret coming west?" Rose met his gaze steadily. "No, Despite the initial disappointment, I've found a place here that feels right. I have meaningful work, independence, and—" She hesitated, connections I value greatly. Something shifted in Wade's expression. He reached out slowly and took her hand in his. "Rose," he said quietly, "I'm glad Hawkins was fool enough to let you go." The directness of his statement made her catch her breath. Wade, before she could continue, William's excited shout interrupted them. He came running back, proudly displaying a good-sized trout he had caught. The moment passed, but the feel of Wade's hand on hers lingered, as did the memory of his words and the look in his eyes. There was no mistaking his interest now, nor could Rose deny her own feelings any longer. As June turned to July, Rose found herself thinking of Wade more often than was proper for a schoolteacher contemplating a respected rancher. Their interactions had taken on a subtle but undeniable romantic tension, though Wade had not spoken directly of his feelings since that day by the creek. The summer term was drawing to a close, with just one more week of classes before the children would have August free for helping with harvests and ranch work. Rose was looking forward to a month of rest herself, though she had agreed to tutor several students whose parents wanted them to advance more quickly. On the last Wednesday of the school term, Rose dismissed her students early due to oppressive heat that made the schoolroom unbearable despite open windows. She was gathering her materials when she heard horses outside, multiple riders, moving quickly. Looking out the window, she saw 3 men dismounting in front of the schoolhouse. One she recognized immediately as Thomas Hawkins. She had seen him in town several times, but had managed to avoid direct interaction. The other 2 were ranch hands she didn't know. Rose's stomach tightened with apprehension. Why would Hawkins be seeking her out? She straightened her skirt and moved to the schoolhouse door, opening it before they could knock. "Mr. Hawkins," she greeted him coolly. "How may I help you?" Hawkins was a handsome man in his early 30s, with dark hair and a confident bearing that bordered on arrogance. He removed his hat, revealing a charming smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Richmond. At last we meet. I've been meaning to introduce myself properly since you arrived." "That's not necessary, Mr. Hawkins. What's done is done." His smile faltered slightly at her directness. "Nevertheless, I feel I owe you an explanation." "You owe me nothing," Rose replied firmly. "Your choice was made before I arrived. I've made my own life here now." Hawkins glanced at his companions, then back to Rose. "May I speak with you privately for a moment?" Every instinct warned against it, but Rose didn't want to appear afraid. "Briefly, I have work to complete." She stepped back, allowing him to enter the schoolhouse while his men remained outside. Hawkins looked around the room with mild interest before turning his attention back to her. "I understand you've become friendly with Wade Ingram," he said without preamble. Rose was taken aback by the statement. "My friendships are my own concern, Mr. Hawkins. Ordinarily, I'd agree. But Ingram and I have a complicated history. I wouldn't want to see you caught in the middle of an old dispute." "What dispute?" Rose asked, her curiosity overcoming her desire to dismiss him. Hawkins leaned against her desk with casual familiarity that irritated her. "Water rights, primarily. The creek that runs through his property begins on my land. There's been disagreement about usage." "That hardly seems relevant to me," Rose pointed out. "Perhaps not directly, but Ingram has a history of using whatever means necessary to get what he wants. I'd hate to see a newcomer like yourself manipulated." Rose's temper flared. "Mr. Hawkins, I may be new to Wyoming, but I'm perfectly capable of judging character for myself. If you came here to warn me away from Wade Ingram, you're wasting your time." Hawkins straightened, his friendly demeanor slipping. "I see he's already won you over. Pity, you seem like an intelligent woman." "I am," Rose confirmed coolly. "Intelligent enough to recognize when someone is attempting to manipulate me. Good day, Mr. Hawkins." For a moment, anger flashed in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with another smile. "As you wish, Miss Richmond, but remember my warning when Ingram shows his true colors." With that, he replaced his hat and left the schoolhouse. Rose watched through the window as he and his men mounted and rode away, her heart pounding with indignation. The encounter left her unsettled. While she didn't believe Hawkins' insinuations about Wade, she wondered about the true nature of their conflict. Wade had mentioned disagreements but had never elaborated. That evening, as Rose was preparing a simple supper in her cottage, a knock came at the door. Opening it cautiously, she was relieved to see Wade standing on her porch, hat in hand. "Wade, this is unexpected." "I apologize for coming unannounced," he said, his expression serious. "William mentioned seeing Hawkins and his men at the schoolhouse today. I wanted to make sure everything was all right." Rose stepped back, inviting him in. "Yes, he paid me a visit. It was uncomfortable." Wade's jaw tightened. "What did he want?" Rose hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "He came to warn me about you, actually. He suggested there was a dispute between you over water rights and implied you might be using me in some way." "Using you," Wade repeated, his voice sharp with disbelief. "For what purpose?" "He wasn't specific," Rose admitted, "but he clearly wanted to create doubt about your character." Wade paced the small room, his frustration evident. "There is a dispute about the creek," he acknowledged. "It begins on his property before flowing through mine. Last year, during the drought, he dammed it upstream, cutting off water to the double circle during the driest months. It nearly ruined me." "That's terrible," Rose said, understanding his anger. "What happened?" "I appealed to the territorial court. They ruled that he couldn't completely block the water riparian rights dictate that downstream properties are entitled to reasonable flow. But by the time the ruling came, I'd lost cattle and crops." Wade stopped pacing and looked at her directly. "But that has nothing to do with you or my interest in you." "I know that," Rose assured him. I didn't believe him for a moment. Relief softened Wade's features. "Thank you for that." He hesitated, then continued, "Rose, I should have been more forthcoming about the situation with Hawkins. I didn't want to burden you with local disputes, especially given your original connection to him." "I appreciate that, but I'd rather know the truth, even if it's complicated." Wade nodded, moving closer to her. "The truth is actually quite simple. Hawkins is a man who believes his wealth gives him the right to control others. He resents anyone who stands up to him, which I've done, not just over water rights, but other matters as well." "What other matters?" Rose asked. Wade's expression darkened. "He treats his workers poorly. Pays them less than fair wages, dismisses them without cause if they complain. Last winter, he evicted a family from a tenant cabin during a blizzard because the father was too ill to work." Rose was appalled. "That's unconscionable." "It is, and there's more." Wade ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of internal conflict. "Rose, there's something you should know about Hawkins and your arrangement with him." Rose steeled herself. "Tell me." He never intended to honor it. "From what I've heard, he reached out to Constance Miller, the woman he eventually married months before you were due to arrive. Your letters were a backup plan in case she refused him." The revelation stung, not because Rose still harbored feelings for Hawkins, but because the calculated nature of his deception was so callous. "How do you know this?" she asked quietly. "Constance's brother works for me occasionally. He mentioned it, not realizing your connection to the situation. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't want to cause you additional pain." Rose sank into a chair, processing this information. "So I was never more than a contingency to him, a practical arrangement if his true preference was unavailable." Wade knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "His failure to recognize your worth speaks to his character, not yours." Their eyes met, and Rose felt the tension that had been building between them for weeks reach a breaking point. Wade's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, silently asking permission. Rose answered by leaning forward and pressing her lips gently to his. The kiss was tender, restrained, but filled with genuine emotion that left her breathless when they finally parted. "I've wanted to do that for some time," Wade admitted, his voice husky. "As have I," Rose confessed, feeling her cheeks warm. Wade stood, maintaining his hold on her hands. "Rose, I don't want there to be any misunderstandings between us. My interest in you has nothing to do with Hawkins or any other matter. From the moment I saw you standing alone by that stagecoach, I've been drawn to your courage, your intelligence, your kindness. And I've come to admire you more than I thought possible in such a short time," Rose replied honestly. "You're not at all what I expected to find in Wyoming." Wade smiled. "Nor you. When I helped you with your trunk that day, I never imagined I was meeting the woman who would capture my heart." The declaration, so straightforward and sincere, touched Rose deeply. It was characteristic of Wade, no flowery sentiments or elaborate phrases, just honest emotion expressed directly. Wade, Rose began, but was interrupted by another knock at the door. They stepped apart quickly, Rose smoothing her skirt as Wade moved to a respectable distance. She opened the door to find Mrs. Peterson standing on the porch, a concerned expression on her face. "Rose, dear I.O." The older woman stopped short when she saw Wade. "Mr. Ingram, I didn't realize you were here." "Mrs. Peterson," Wade greeted her with a polite nod. "I was just checking on Miss Richmond after hearing Hawkins paid her a visit today." "That's actually why I've come," Mrs. Peterson said, her expression growing serious again. "There's trouble brewing, Rose. Hawkins was at the saloon earlier, making some rather unsavory implications about you and Mr. Ingram here." Rose felt her face flush with indignation. "What kind of implications?" Mrs. Peterson glanced uncomfortably at Wade. "The kind that could damage a schoolteacher's reputation." "He suggested your frequent visits to the double circle weren't entirely proper." Wade's expression hardened. "That's outrageous. Miss Richmond has been William's teacher and a family friend, nothing more." The slight falsehood was necessary to protect Rose's reputation, though the kiss they had just shared suggested their relationship was evolving into something deeper. "I know that," Mrs. Peterson assured them. "And most folks in town know Hawkins well enough to take his gossip with a grain of salt. But I thought you should be aware." "Thank you for telling me," Rose said, her mind racing with concern. While she had done nothing improper, even the suggestion of impropriety could threaten her position as teacher. The school board would be meeting soon to discuss her continued employment for the fall term. "I should go," Wade said, reaching for his hat. "Mrs. Peterson, would you mind staying with Miss Richmond for a while? I need to speak with Mayor Wilson about this situation." "Of course," the older woman agreed. Wade turned to Rose, his expression softening. "Try not to worry. Hawkins won't succeed in damaging your reputation." After he left, Mrs. Peterson settled into Rose's rocking chair with a sigh. "That man is clearly smitten with you," she observed. "Mrs. Peterson?" Rose exclaimed, embarrassed. "Oh, don't play coy with me, dear. I've seen how you look at each other, and I say it's wonderful. Wade Ingram is one of the finest men in the territory." Rose couldn't suppress a small smile. "He is rather remarkable." "But Hawkins could still cause trouble," Mrs. Peterson warned. "Some folks are traditional about these things. A single woman, particularly a schoolteacher, is expected to be above reproach." "I've done nothing wrong," Rose insisted. "Of course not. But perception matters, especially in small towns." Mrs. Peterson patted Rose's hand. "Just be careful, dear. Perhaps fewer visits to the ranch, at least until the school board meeting has passed." The suggestion made sense, though Rose was disappointed by the necessity. Just when her relationship with Wade was deepening, they would need to be more circumspect than ever. The following days brought both tension and resolution. Wade met with Mayor Wilson, who assured him that Hawkins' gossip would not influence the school board's decision about Rose's continued employment. Nevertheless, Rose and Wade agreed to limit their interactions temporarily, communicating primarily through notes delivered by William. The school term ended with a small celebration where students presented recitations and displayed their work for parents. Rose was touched when Wade attended with William, though they exchanged only the most proper greetings in public. The school board meeting took place the following week. Rose waited anxiously in her cottage for news, relieved when Mayor Wilson himself came to inform her that she had been unanimously approved to continue as Pinewood's teacher for the coming year, with a small increase in salary. "The board was most impressed with the progress your students have made," he told her. "And as for Hawkins' insinuations, well, we pay them no mind. His standing in the community has suffered since that business with the Jensen family last winter." Rose thanked him sincerely, her relief palpable. Her position was secure, her reputation intact. Now she could focus on the more personal matter of her feelings for Wade Ingram. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The very next day, Wade arrived at her cottage with a proposal not of marriage, but of an outing. "The town's Independence Day celebration is this Saturday," he reminded her. I thought perhaps you might allow me to escort you. Rose hesitated. Are you sure that's wise, after Hawkins' gossip? The board has made their decision, Wade pointed out. And I'm tired of allowing Hawkins to dictate our actions. Besides, a public celebration is hardly a clandestine meeting. Put that way, Rose couldn't argue. Then I accept your invitation. The 4th of July celebration was Pinewood's largest annual event. The entire town gathered for a picnic in the meadow behind the church, followed by games, music, dancing, and finally fireworks purchased at great expense from the railroad company. Wade arrived promptly at noon to escort Rose to the festivities. He had dressed carefully in a clean white shirt and dark vest, his usually untamed hair slicked neatly back. Rose wore a blue dress she had been saving for a special occasion, with a red ribbon at the waist in honor of the holiday. You look beautiful, Wade told her sincerely as he offered his arm. The celebration was already underway when they arrived. Tables laden with food stretched under the trees, and children raced across the meadow flying brightly colored kites. A platform had been erected for dancing later, and a small band was setting up their instruments. Their arrival together drew some attention, but the reactions were largely positive, friendly nods, welcoming smiles, and a knowing wink from Mrs. Peterson. William spotted them immediately and hurried over, proudly showing Rose the whittled eagle he had entered in the crafts competition. The afternoon passed pleasantly as they mingled with townspeople, participated in games, and enjoyed the abundant food. Wade remained attentive but respectful, clearly mindful of maintaining propriety while still making his interest in Rose evident. As twilight approached and the dancing began, Wade led Rose onto the platform for a waltz. His hand at her waist was proper but warm, his gaze intent on her face as they moved in perfect harmony to the music. I've been thinking, he said quietly so only she could hear. About us. Have you? Rose replied, her heart quickening. I know it hasn't been long since you arrived in Pinewood. You came with certain expectations that were disappointed. I don't want to rush you or presume too much. What are you saying, Wade? He guided her through a turn before answering. I'm saying that my feelings for you have grown stronger each day. I'm saying that I see a future with you if you're willing. Rose's breath caught. Are you proposing, Mr. Ingram? Not yet, he replied with a small smile. That deserves a more private moment than a crowded dance floor. But I wanted you to know my intentions are serious. As are my feelings for you, Rose admitted, which surprises me given how recently we met. Some things don't require years to recognize, Wade said simply. When they're right, they're right. The music ended, and they joined the applause, though Rose felt as if they existed in a bubble separate from the festivities around them. Wade's words had shifted something between them, making concrete what had been only implied before. As they stepped off the dance floor, Rose noticed Thomas Hawkins watching them from the edge of the crowd, his expression dark. His wife stood beside him, a pretty blonde woman who looked uncomfortable with her husband's obvious displeasure. Ignore him, Wade murmured, noting the direction of her gaze. This is our evening, but Hawkins wasn't content to be ignored. As the evening progressed and darkness fell, he approached them as they stood waiting for the fireworks to begin. Miss Richmond, he greeted her with exaggerated politeness. Mr. Ingram, enjoying the celebration, very much, Rose replied coolly. Good evening, Mr. Hawkins. I see the school board wasn't concerned about your friendship, Hawkins continued, gesturing between them. How fortunate for you both. Wade stepped forward slightly. Hawkins, this isn't the time or place. No, when better to discuss community standards than a community gathering. Hawkins' voice had risen, drawing attention from nearby celebrants. Our school teacher spends more time at your ranch than in town, Ingram. People talk. Rose felt her face flush with embarrassment and anger. Mr. Hawkins, my private life is not your concern. It is when you're teaching our children, Hawkins retorted. Values matter, Miss Richmond. Wade's hands clenched at his sides. You're making a spectacle of yourself, Hawkins. Go back to your wife. The mention of his wife seemed to inflame Hawkins further. Don't presume to tell me what to do, Ingram. You may have won the water rights case, but you haven't won everything. This isn't about water rights or any other dispute between us, Wade said evenly. This is about your inappropriate fixation on Miss Richmond since she arrived, Hawkins scoffed. Fixation? She was coming to marry me, remember? I had every right. You had no right to abandon your agreement without so much as a letter, Rose interrupted, her temper finally breaking. You had no right to spread gossip about me when I chose to build a new life here, and you certainly have no right to dictate who I spend my time with now. A small crowd had gathered, watching the confrontation with varying degrees of discomfort and interest. Well said, Miss Richmond, came Mayor Wilson's voice as he pushed through the onlookers. Hawkins, I believe you owe our schoolteacher an apology. Hawkins looked around, suddenly aware of the audience and the lack of sympathy for his position. His wife had appeared at the edge of the crowd, her expression mortified. This isn't over, Ingram, he muttered before stalking away, grabbing his wife's arm as he passed her. The crowd dispersed slowly, with several people pausing to express support for Rose. Mrs. Peterson squeezed her hand, and Mayor Wilson assured her that Hawkins' behavior would not reflect on her in any way. When they were finally alone again, Wade turned to Rose with concern. I'm sorry about that. Hawkins has always been volatile, but this fixation on you is beyond the usual dispute. It's not your fault, Rose assured him, though she was shaken by the public confrontation. He's angry that things haven't gone his way with me or with you. The first fireworks exploded overhead, momentarily turning night to day with brilliant colors. The crowd's attention shifted upward with exclamations of delight. Wade put his arm around Rose's shoulders, a public gesture that would have been unthinkable before Hawkins' outburst had made discretion seem pointless. She leaned into him, finding comfort in his solid presence as they watched the display. Don't let him spoil our evening, Wade said softly. This is still a celebration. Rose nodded, determined not to allow Hawkins' bitterness to overshadow what had otherwise been a perfect day. As the fireworks continued overhead, casting multicolored light across Wade's face, she made a decision. Wade, she said, turning to face him. I don't want to wait, he looked at her questioningly. Wait, for whatever comes next for us. Life is uncertain, I know that better than most. If there's one thing I've learned since coming west, it's that we must seize happiness when we find it. Understanding dawned in Wade's eyes. He took her hands in his, heedless of the watching townsfolk. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that I love you, Rose replied simply. I didn't come to Wyoming expecting to find love, but I have, with you. The fireworks reached their crescendo overhead, but Wade seemed not to notice. He drew her slightly away from the crowd into the shadow of a large oak tree. I love you too, Rose Richmond, he said, his voice steady and sure. I think I have since that first day when I found you crying beside your trunk and realized you were the strongest woman I'd ever met. He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small object. In the intermittent light of the fireworks, Rose could see it was a simple gold band with a small pearl. This was my mother's, Wade explained. I've been carrying it since our picnic by the creek, waiting for the right moment. He took a deep breath. Rose, will you marry me? Will you make the double circle your home, help me raise William, and build a life with me? Tears sprang to Rose's eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Wade slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that conveyed all the love and promise of their future together. Above them, the final fireworks illuminated the night sky, a fitting celebration of the new beginning they had found in each other. The news of Rose and Wade's engagement spread quickly through Pinewood. The reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Townspeople had observed their growing relationship and approved of the match between their respected schoolteacher and the honorable rancher. Rose continued teaching through August, tutoring students in the mornings and spending afternoons preparing for both the fall term and her new life as Wade's wife. They agreed on a September wedding, after school was in session, but before winter weather made travel difficult for guests coming from neighboring communities. William was thrilled with the news, embracing Rose with uncharacteristic enthusiasm when Wade told him of their engagement. Does this mean you'll live at the ranch? He asked eagerly. Yes, Rose confirmed, Though I'll continue teaching through the school year, it means early mornings riding to town, but it's not too far. The only cloud on their happiness was Thomas Hawkins. After his public confrontation with Wade at the Independence Day celebration, he had become more openly hostile, refusing to patronize businesses that supported Wade and spreading rumors about the Double Circle's financial stability. "He's trying to undermine my arrangements with the cattle buyers," Wade explained to Rose one evening as they sat on her cottage porch, "suggesting I won't be able to fulfill my contracts. Can he hurt you financially?" Rose asked, concerned. Wade sighed. "Potentially. Banking and cattle trading rely heavily on reputation and trust. If enough people believe his lies, it could affect my ability to secure loans or sell my stock at fair prices." "There must be something we can do," Rose insisted. "Surely others can vouch for your reliability." "Mayor Wilson and some other ranchers have already spoken on my behalf," Wade assured her. "And my record speaks for itself. But Hawkins has money and influence beyond Pinewood. He's been traveling to Cheyenne, speaking with bankers and buyers there." Rose reached for his hand. "We'll face this together, whatever happens." Wade brought her hand to his lips. "Having you by my side makes everything else seem manageable." As their wedding day approached, Rose divided her time between teaching and preparations. Mrs. Peterson and other town women helped her sew a wedding dress, not the elaborate gown she might have worn in Boston, but a lovely creation of cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. The ceremony was to be held in Pinewood's church, with a celebration afterward on the Double Circle Ranch. Wade had been working with his hands to prepare for Rose's arrival, expanding the master bedroom and adding a small study where she could grade papers and prepare lessons. 2 weeks before the wedding, Rose was cleaning up her classroom after dismissing her students when she heard a commotion outside. Looking through the window, she saw Wade riding into town at a gallop, his expression grim. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped and strode toward the schoolhouse. "Wade, what's wrong?" she asked as he entered, alarmed by his disheveled appearance and the tension in his face. "Hawkins has dammed the creek again," he said without preamble. "Completely this time, despite the court ruling. My southern pastures are already drying up, and if it continues, I'll lose access to water for the house and barn as well." Rose's hand flew to her mouth. "Can he do that, after the court's decision?" "No, but it will take time to get the territorial marshal involved, time my cattle and crops don't have." Wade ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm gathering men to ride to his property and dismantle the dam." "Is that wise?" Rose asked, concerned about the potential for violence. "If you take matters into your own hands, I don't have a choice," Wade interrupted. "The law is on my side, but law moves slowly out here. I've sent word to the marshal, but he's 3 days' ride away at least." Rose moved to him, placing her hands on his chest. "Promise me you'll be careful. That you won't let this escalate into something dangerous." Wade covered her hands with his own. "I promise I'll do everything possible to resolve this peacefully, but I have to protect what's mine, Rose, not just for me but for William, for our future together." She nodded, understanding his position even as she worried about the potential consequences. "When are you going?" "At first light tomorrow. I've gathered 8 men I trust, ranchers who have had their own troubles with Hawkins and understand what's at stake." "Come to me when it's done," Rose requested. "No matter the hour," Wade agreed, kissing her briefly before departing to continue his preparations. Rose finished her work mechanically, her mind preoccupied with worry about the confrontation to come. That night, sleep eluded her. She paced her small cottage, imagining all the ways the situation could go wrong. Hawkins was unpredictable and had already demonstrated his animosity toward Wade. Would he resort to violence to protect his illegal dam? Morning came with no word from Wade. Rose taught her classes with forced cheerfulness, trying not to let her students see her distraction. When the final bell rang, she hurried to her cottage, hoping to find Wade waiting for her, but the porch was empty. As evening approached with still no word, Rose made a decision. Changing into her riding skirt and boots, she walked to the livery stable and arranged to rent a horse. "You heading out to the Double Circle, Miss Richmond?" the stable owner asked as he helped her saddle a gentle mare. Yes, Mr. Collins, I'm concerned about the situation with the dam. The man's expression grew serious. As are many of us, Hawkins has pushed too far this time. Even those who have supported him in the past are questioning his actions. Rose mounted the horse, grateful for the riding lessons Wade had given her over the summer. If anyone comes looking for me, that's where I'll be. The ride to the double circle took longer than usual as Rose maintained a careful pace, mindful of her limited experience. The sun was setting by the time she approached the ranch, casting long shadows across the landscape. As she crested the final hill, Rose saw activity in the ranch yard, horses and men moving about, lanterns being lit against the gathering darkness. Her heart quickened as she urged her mare forward. William spotted her first, running to meet her as she dismounted. Miss Richmond. Uncle Wade isn't back yet. I know, William, that's why I've come. What news have you heard? The boy's face was tense with worry. One of the men returned about an hour ago. He said there was trouble at the dam. Hawkins and his hands were waiting with rifles. Rose's blood ran cold. Was anyone hurt? He didn't say. Just that Uncle Wade sent him back to gather more men and bring weapons. William swallowed hard. I wanted to go, but Mrs. Garrett wouldn't let me. She was right to keep you here, Rose assured him, putting an arm around his shoulders. Your uncle wouldn't want you in danger. They walked to the house together, where Mrs. Garrett was preparing enough food to feed an army. They'll be hungry when they return, she explained to Rose. Fighting or negotiating, men need to eat after. Rose helped with the preparations, grateful for the activity to occupy her hands while her mind raced with worry. Night had fully fallen when they heard horses approaching, many of them moving at a quick pace. William ran to the window. They're back. Rose followed him outside, her eyes searching the group of riders for Wade. She found him in the lead, dismounting wearily from his horse. His clothes were dirty and his expression grim, but he appeared uninjured. Wade, she called, hurrying toward him. He looked up, surprise giving way to relief when he saw her. Rose, what are you doing here? I was worried when I didn't hear from you, she explained, reaching him and quickly scanning for any sign of injury. William said there was trouble. Wade nodded, accepting a canteen from one of his men before answering. Hawkins had armed men guarding the dam. There was a standoff for several hours. Was anyone hurt? Rose asked anxiously. No, thankfully. One of Hawkins' men fired a warning shot, but cooler heads prevailed. Wade took a long drink from the canteen. The territorial marshal arrived just as things were getting tense. The marshal, I thought he was days away. Apparently, Mayor Wilson sent a telegraph to the governor after hearing about the situation. The governor ordered the marshal to make Pinewood his priority. Wade's lips quirked in a tired smile. Having friends in the right places helped. So what happened with the dam? William asked, joining them. The marshal ordered it dismantled immediately, citing the previous court ruling. When Hawkins protested, the marshal threatened to arrest him for contempt of court and interfering with water rights. Wade's satisfaction was evident. We spent the afternoon tearing it down while the marshal supervised. Relief washed over Rose. So it's over, Wade's expression sobered. The immediate crisis, yes, but Hawkins isn't a man who accepts defeat gracefully. He made threats, as we left vague ones, but menacing nonetheless. What kind of threats? Rose asked. He said I hadn't seen the last of this, that he'd make sure I regretted crossing him. Wade shrugged, trying to appear unconcerned, though Rose could see the tension in his shoulders. Standard Hawkins bluster, Mrs. Garrett called them in to eat, and the conversation shifted to more immediate matters, feeding the hungry men, caring for the horses, and planning the next day's ranch work that had been neglected during the confrontation. Later, when the workers had departed and William had gone to bed, Rose and Wade sat alone on the porch, the night air cool around them. I was so worried, Rose admitted, leaning against Wade's shoulder, when William told me there were armed men. I was careful, as I promised, Wade assured her, his arm tightening around her. Though I will admit, when the marshal arrived, I was more relieved than I let on. The situation was volatile. Rose shivered, imagining how differently the day might have ended. Do you think Hawkins will retaliate in some other way? Wade was silent for a moment, considering the question. Possibly. But with the marshal aware of the situation and the governor involved, his options are limited. He's a bully, but not stupid. He knows when official attention is on him. Our wedding is less than 2 weeks away, Rose reminded him. I don't want this hanging over us. It won't, Wade promised, turning to face her. Whatever Hawkins may do, he can't touch what matters most us, our family, our future together. His confidence reassured her, and Rose allowed herself to set aside worry for the moment, focusing instead on the joy to come. The days leading up to the wedding passed quickly. The creek flowed freely again, revitalizing the Double Circle's southern pastures. The marshal remained in the area, making his presence known to ensure compliance with the court's ruling. Hawkins was notably absent from town, reportedly traveling to Denver on business. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and mild, perfect September weather. Rose dressed in her cottage with the help of Mrs. Peterson and Miss Winters, her hands trembling slightly as they arranged the lace veil in her auburn hair. You look beautiful, dear, Mrs. Peterson declared, stepping back to admire the completed effect. Wade Ingram is a fortunate man. I'm the fortunate one, Rose replied softly, studying her reflection in the small mirror. The woman who looked back at her seemed far removed from the disappointed mail-order bride who had arrived in Pinewood just 5 months earlier. The church was filled to capacity when Rose arrived. It seemed the entire town had turned out for the occasion, along with ranchers and their families from the surrounding area. As the music began and Rose walked down the aisle on Mayor Wilson's arm, in place of her father, she had eyes only for Wade, standing tall and handsome at the altar. His face as he watched her approach held such love and pride that Rose felt tears threatening. William stood beside his uncle as best man, looking grown up and serious in his new suit. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with traditional vows spoken in clear, unwavering voices. When Wade slipped the gold band onto Rose's finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his eyes never leaving hers. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister declared. Mr. Ingram, you may kiss your bride. Wade's kiss was tender, but conveyed a promise of deeper passion to come. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers as they turned to face their friends and neighbors as husband and wife. The celebration at the Double Circle Ranch lasted well into the evening. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food prepared by Mrs. Garrett and the town's women. A platform similar to the one from the Independence Day celebration provided space for dancing, and the same small band played lively tunes that kept spirits high. As twilight fell, lanterns were lit around the yard, creating a magical atmosphere. Rose danced with her new husband, then with William, Mayor Wilson, and many others who wished to congratulate the bride. Wade was similarly in demand among the female guests. They were taking a momentary rest, sitting together watching the dancing when a ranch hand approached with an urgent expression. Mr. Ingram, there's fire in the north pasture, he reported quietly, clearly trying not to alarm the guests. Johnson spotted it from the ridge. Wade was immediately alert. How bad? Spreading fast with the wind. Johnson and Miller are already heading there with water barrels, but they sent me for more help. Wade turned to Rose, apology in his eyes. I need to go. Of course, she agreed immediately. Be careful. As Wade gathered men to fight the fire, Rose found herself surrounded by concerned women offering support. Mrs. Peterson took charge, instructing the band to continue playing and encouraging guests to remain calm. Fires happen on ranches, she reminded Rose. The men know how to handle them. But as more ranch hands departed and the glow on the northern horizon grew brighter, Rose found it impossible to maintain the pretense of celebration. William appeared at her side, his young face tense with worry. Should I go help? He asked. I know where the fire breaks are. Rose hesitated. The boy was nearly 16 and knew the ranch better than most, but he was still young. Before she could decide, Mayor Wilson joined them. Mrs. Ingram, he said, using her new title for the first time, I've sent word to town for additional help, but there's something you should know. One of the men reported seeing riders leaving the area just before the fire was spotted. The implication was clear. Hawkins, Rose asked, though she already knew the answer. Mayor Wilson nodded grimly. It appears he's made good on his threats after all. Rose straightened her spine, a surge of protective anger replacing her anxiety. "William, go to the house and help Mrs. Garrett gather medical supplies. There may be injuries." She turned to Mayor Wilson. "Can you organize the remaining men to protect the house and barn if the fire spreads this way?" The mayor nodded, impressed by her decisiveness. "Already underway, and I've sent for the marshal as well." For the next several hours, Rose found herself at the center of an emergency response that bore little resemblance to the wedding celebration it had replaced. Guests with ranching experience joined the firefighting efforts, while others helped move cattle to safety or prepared the house for possible evacuation. It was past midnight when Wade finally returned, his face and clothes blackened with soot, his eyes red from smoke. He found Rose in the kitchen, where she was preparing coffee and food for the returning firefighters. "It's contained," he reported wearily. "We lost about 50 acres of grazing land and some fencing, but no cattle and no structures." Rose handed him a cup of coffee before embracing him, heedless of the soot that transferred to her wedding dress. "Thank God you're safe, all of you." Wade held her tightly. "I'm sorry about our wedding day. This isn't how it was supposed to end." "It hasn't ended yet," Rose reminded him gently. "We're married, we're together, and we've protected what's ours. That's what matters." Wade pressed his forehead to hers. "You're remarkable, Rose Ingram." Her new name brought a smile to her lips despite the circumstances. "As are you, husband." Dawn found them still awake, sitting on the porch with William as the last of the firefighters departed, and the ranch grew quiet again. The marshal had arrived during the night and was already gathering evidence about the fire's origin. "He'll find proof it was Hawkins," William said with youthful certainty. "Then he'll have to pay for what he did." "Perhaps," Wade replied, his tone measured, "but even if he does, it won't restore what was lost." Rose heard the weariness in his voice, not just physical exhaustion, but a deeper fatigue from the ongoing conflict. "What do you need most right now?" she asked him. Wade considered the question. "Peace," he finally said. "For our family, for the ranch, for this community. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder, wondering what Hawkins will do next." "Then perhaps it's time for a different approach," Rose suggested. "Not retaliation, not even just legal action, but something unexpected." "What do you mean?" Wade asked. Rose wasn't entirely sure herself, but an idea was forming. Hawkins thrives on conflict. It's how he defines himself through opposition and control. What if, instead of fighting him directly, we found a way to make peace more advantageous to him than continued hostility? William looked skeptical. "How do you make peace with someone who sets fire to your land on your wedding day?" It was a fair question, and Rose didn't have an immediate answer. But as she watched the sun rise over the damaged pasture, she felt a determination that transcended her anger and fear. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I do know that continuing this cycle of retaliation solves nothing. There must be another way." Wade studied her face, then nodded slowly. "If anyone can find it, you can." He reached for her hand. "But that's a challenge for another day. Right now, I believe I owe my bride a proper wedding night, even if it's morning." William made a hasty excuse to check on the horses, his cheeks reddening as he left them alone. Despite the exhaustion of the long night, Wade and Rose found their way to the master bedroom, now theirs to share. The room had been prepared for their wedding night, fresh linens on the bed, wildflowers in a vase by the window, their personal belongings arranged in domestic harmony. "It's not how I imagined our first night as husband and wife," Wade said as he closed the door behind them. "Both of us exhausted, smelling of smoke, with half the county having trampled through our home." Rose moved to him, beginning to unbutton his soot-stained shirt. "Perhaps not, but we're here together. Everything else is just detail." Wade caught her hands, bringing them to his lips. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" "Yes," Rose smiled, "but I wouldn't mind hearing it again." "I love you, Rose Ingram," he said solemnly, "more than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, rising on tiptoes to kiss him, "now and always." Their lovemaking was gentle, tempered by exhaustion, but deepened by the emotional intensity of the day they had shared. Afterward, they slept wrapped in each other's arms, finding peace despite the challenges that awaited them. The marshal's investigation confirmed what they already knew: the fire had been deliberately set, and witnesses had identified men from Hawkins' ranch fleeing the scene. But Hawkins himself had a solid alibi, having been seen in Denver by multiple reputable sources at the time of the fire. "He hired it done," Wade said when the marshal delivered this news. "Paid someone to do his dirty work while he established his whereabouts elsewhere." "Likely so," the marshal agreed, "but without direct evidence linking him to the arsonists, it's their word against his hired hands. And his men are claiming they were there to warn you about the fire, not start it. It was a frustrating outcome, but not unexpected. The law in the territories was still developing, and justice often came slowly, if at all." As autumn progressed, and the first snows dusted the mountains, Rose and Wade settled into married life. The burned pasture would recover with spring growth, and Wade had already begun rebuilding the damaged fencing. Life at the Double Circle continued its seasonal rhythms: cattle being moved to winter pastures, hay stored for the cold months ahead, preserves and dried foods prepared to sustain them until spring. Rose continued teaching, riding to town each morning and returning to the ranch in the afternoon. Her students thrived under her guidance, and the town council had already asked her to return for the following year, with another increase in salary. Hawkins remained a concern, but a distant one. He had returned to Pinewood, but kept largely to his own ranch, avoiding direct confrontation with Wade or Rose. The marshal's presence in the area had perhaps tempered his actions, though no one believed the grudge had dissipated. As Christmas approached, Rose found herself facing a new and unexpected challenge, one that filled her with both joy and trepidation. After several weeks of morning sickness and fatigue, a visit to the doctor in town confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was expecting a child, due in early summer. Wade's reaction to the news was everything Rose could have hoped for: pure joy mixed with protective concern for her health. William, after overcoming his initial embarrassment at the implications, embraced the idea of becoming an older cousin with enthusiasm. "We'll need to hire an assistant teacher for when the baby comes," Rose mused as they sat by the fire one December evening, making plans. "Someone who can take over my classes during my confinement and perhaps continue helping afterward." "Whatever you need," Wade assured her, his hand resting protectively over hers. "Though I admit, the thought of you riding to town each day in your condition concerns me." "The doctor says it's safe for several more months," Rose reminded him. "And when the weather improves, perhaps we could look into a small buggy that would be easier for me to manage than horseback." They were discussing these practical matters when a knock came at the door, unusual for an evening, especially with snow falling steadily outside. Wade answered it cautiously, surprised to find Mayor Wilson stomping snow from his boots on the porch. "Wilson, come in," Wade invited, concern evident in his voice. "What brings you out on a night like this?" The mayor entered, declining to remove his heavy coat. "I can't stay, but I needed to deliver this news in person." He looked from Wade to Rose, his expression grave. "Thomas Hawkins was found dead this morning." The statement hung in the air, shocking in its abruptness. "Dead," Wade repeated. "How?" "His horse returned to the ranch without him yesterday evening. His men searched through the night and found him at the bottom of Copper Canyon. Appears the horse lost its footing on the icy trail." Rose sank into a chair, stunned by the news. Despite everything Hawkins had done, his death was a shock, a sudden, violent end to a man who had loomed so large in their lives. "His wife?" she asked quietly. "Constance is distraught, naturally," Mayor Wilson replied. "She's with her parents now. The funeral will be on Saturday." After the mayor departed, Wade and Rose sat in silence for some time, processing the unexpected development. "It doesn't seem real," Rose finally said. "After all the trouble he caused, to die in a simple riding accident. Nature can be more decisive than law," Wade observed. "All his money and influence couldn't save him from a misstep on an icy trail." "What will happen to his ranch?" Rose asked. "It depends on his will." "If he left everything to Constance, she'll likely sell. She never seemed interested in ranching, and without Hawkins, there's nothing to keep her here." Rose considered this. "If the ranch sells, perhaps that's the resolution we've been seeking." New owners might be more amenable to cooperation than conflict, Wade nodded slowly. Perhaps, though it's a strange kind of peace coming through death rather than reconciliation. Not peace, Rose corrected gently. Just an end to one chapter and the beginning of another. The funeral was well attended, with most of Pinewood's residents present despite the ongoing snow. Rose and Wade went, partly out of respect for Constance and partly from a sense that their presence was necessary for the community's healing. Constance Hawkins, a small, blonde woman with red-rimmed eyes, appeared surprised when Rose approached her after the service to offer condolences. "You're very kind to come, Mrs. Ingram," she said softly, "especially considering." "The past is the past," Rose assured her. "I'm truly sorry for your loss." Something like relief crossed Constance's face. "Thank you. That means more than you know." In the weeks that followed, Rose's prediction proved accurate. Constance decided to sell the Hawkins ranch and return to her family in Laramie. The buyer was a cattle company from Denver, represented by a professional manager who quickly made it clear that cooperation with neighboring ranches was preferable to conflict. The water dispute was resolved with a formal agreement that benefited both properties, and the new manager even approached Wade about potentially combining cattle drives to save costs. The tension that had defined the relationship between the two largest ranches in the area dissipated, replaced by cautious cooperation. As winter gave way to spring, and spring to early summer, Rose's condition became increasingly evident. She reluctantly gave up teaching in May, turning her classes over to Miss Clara Winters, who had revealed an unexpected aptitude for education. The school board assured Rose that her position would be waiting when she was ready to return, whether in the fall or the following year. On a warm June morning, almost exactly a year after Rose had first arrived in Pinewood, she gave birth to a daughter, Sarah Rose Ingram, named for Wade's sister and herself. The birth was uncomplicated, and the baby healthy and strong with a shock of dark hair like her father's. As Rose held her daughter while Wade and William looked on with identical expressions of wonder, she marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come to Wyoming as a mail-order bride, expecting a practical arrangement with a stranger. Instead, she had found genuine love, a family, and a community where she truly belonged. "She's perfect," Wade said, his voice thick with emotion as he gently touched his daughter's tiny hand. "She is," Rose agreed. "And so is all of this." Wade met her eyes, understanding her meaning. "Not quite what you expected when you stepped off that stagecoach, is it?" Rose smiled, remembering that tearful day when she had stood beside her trunk, feeling abandoned and alone. "No, it's infinitely better." 5 years later, the Double Circle Ranch had prospered beyond Wade's initial dreams. The addition of adjacent land, purchased when neighboring properties came up for sale, had expanded their holdings to over 2,000 acres. The ranch now employed 12 full-time hands and additional seasonal workers during busy periods. Rose had returned to teaching part-time, sharing the position with Clara Winters in an arrangement that benefited them both. 3 days a week, Rose taught the older students advanced subjects while Clara handled the younger children. The other 2 days, Clara managed the entire school while Rose focused on ranch affairs and their growing family. Sarah, now 5, was joined by a 3-year-old brother, James, and Rose was expecting their 3rd child in the fall. The children thrived in the ranch environment, learning both practical skills and academic knowledge from their parents and the extended family of ranch workers who doted on them. William, now 21, had developed into a capable ranch manager. After completing his education, including 2 years at an agricultural college in Denver, that Rose had encouraged him to attend, he had returned to the Double Circle with new ideas and techniques that Wade had embraced. On the anniversary of their wedding each year, Rose and Wade made a point of riding together to the spot where they had first picnicked by the creek. This year was no exception, though Rose's pregnancy meant a gentler pace than usual. As they spread a blanket beneath the same cottonwood tree, now 5 years older and more magnificent, Wade helped Rose settle comfortably before unpacking the basket Mrs. Garrett had prepared. "Do you realize," Rose said, accepting a glass of lemonade, that it's been 6 years since I arrived in Pinewood. 6 years since you found me crying beside that trunk. Wade smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes crinkling with the expression. At 34, he was in his prime, still physically strong from ranch work, but with an added maturity and confidence that came from years of successful management and family life. The best day of my life, he declared. Though I didn't know it at the time, nor I, Rose admitted. I was too busy feeling sorry for myself to recognize the opportunity that had just appeared. Wade reached for her hand, his thumb caressing the gold band he had placed there 5 years ago. We've built something good here, haven't we? Not just the ranch, but our life together. We have, Rose agreed, looking out over the creek and the thriving land beyond. Something enduring. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, appreciating the beauty around them and the journey they had shared. So much had changed since that first meeting, hardships overcome, joys celebrated, a family created and nurtured. I love you, Rose Ingram, Wade said simply, his blue eyes as kind and steady as they had been that first day. More with each passing year. Rose leaned against his shoulder, content in a way she couldn't have imagined when she'd boarded that stagecoach in Boston, seeking a practical arrangement with a stranger. And I love you, she replied softly, my unexpected cowboy. The mail-order bride who had been left crying beside her trunk had found far more than she'd been seeking, not just security or companionship, but a love that had transformed her life and created a legacy that would endure for generations to come on the wind-swept plains of Wyoming.